Today, I heard a case that honestly stayed with me long after the courtroom emptied. A 21-year-old young man walked into my courtroom carrying something he never should have had to carry at his age. Nearly $10,000 in debt attached to his credit report. And according to him, none of it was supposed to belong to him. He stood there calmly, respectful, soft-spoken, clearly nervous. And he told me that one day he checked his credit score and discovered a judgment connected to an apartment lease he claimed he never legally agreed to. What shocked me immediately was the date on the lease, at the time it was signed. He was only 17 years old. Now, legally, a 17-year-old cannot enter into a binding contract. That's not complicated. That's basic law. So the moment I heard his age, I already knew something about this situation was deeply wrong. I asked him where he had been living at the time. And what he told me made the situation even sadder. He explained that during those years, he had mostly been bouncing between his older brother's house, friends' homes, and relatives. He wasn't even consistently living with his mother. Most of his mail still went to her address, but he himself had been moving around, trying to figure life out, while still basically a teenager. Then his mother stood up, and suddenly the entire courtroom shifted, because this case stopped being just about debt. It became about responsibility. The mother had recently been released from prison after serving 8 years. When she got out, she needed a place to live. According to her, she couldn't qualify for the apartment on her own. So she asked her teenage son to help her get approved for the lease. That alone was troubling. But what came next was worse. She admitted that the lease had been electronically signed using her son's name while he was still underage. And when I asked her directly whether she understood that a 17-year-old legally cannot sign a binding lease, she kept trying to explain herself by talking about stress, hardship, and how difficult her life had been after prison. Now, listen carefully. Life can absolutely be difficult. People struggle. People make mistakes. But there is a difference between struggling and dragging your child into the consequences of your decisions. And that's exactly what happened here. The deeper we got into the case, the worse it became. Not only had the lease been violated, but there had also been property damage connected to the apartment after they moved out. Eventually, the unpaid rent, legal fees, collection costs, damages, cleaning expenses, and penalties piled up to nearly $10,000. And all of it had landed on the credit report of a young man who was just beginning adulthood. What bothered me most was that this young man actually seemed responsible. He had gone to college. He had gotten certified in technical work. He had found a stable job building industrial control panels. He was trying to build a future for himself. And instead of starting adult life with a clean slate, he discovered that his credit had already been damaged before he even had a real chance to establish himself. That kind of thing follows people for years. It affects apartments, loans, cars, jobs, opportunities. And sometimes people don't fully understand how devastating damaged credit can be until they experience it themselves. As the hearing continued, the mother admitted that she had spoken with the law firm handling the collections. She admitted she had even told them her son had only been 17 years old when the lease was signed. So at that point, she already knew he legally should not have been responsible for the debt. But despite knowing that, the situation was never fixed. Instead, the debt kept growing, and her son kept suffering the consequences. Then we heard from the older brother, and honestly, that testimony said a lot without trying too hard. He explained that his younger brother had mostly been staying with him during that period. He described him as respectful, hard-working, and not the kind of person who normally gets involved in chaos like this. You could hear the disappointment in his voice. Not just disappointment in the situation, but disappointment in what had happened to their family. And sitting there listening to all of this, one thought kept repeating in my mind. Parents are supposed to protect their children from hardship, not become the source of it. No parent is perfect. Nobody lives a flawless life, but there is one responsibility that never changes. You do not sacrifice your child's future to solve your own problems, especially not financially. At one point during the hearing, the mother kept saying she had been stressed. And I finally had to stop her, because stress may explain behavior, but it does not excuse it. Everyone experiences stress. That does not give someone the right to destroy another person's financial future, especially their own child's. What also stood out to me was how casually the property damage was discussed. At one point, she admitted that damage had been done to the apartment because she was overwhelmed emotionally and not getting along with management. But being emotional doesn't erase accountability. And by then, the debt had already exploded into something far beyond unpaid rent. Transaction agencies became involved. Legal judgments were entered, fees stacked on top of fees. And all the while, this young man was walking around unaware that his name had become tied to the entire disaster. So, I decided to step in and figure out exactly how much would need to be paid in order to completely clear his credit. My law clerk contacted the collection office directly during the hearing. And after breaking down the judgment, fees, damages, and collections balance, we confirmed the final amount necessary to wipe the debt from his record entirely, over $9,000. But here's what mattered most. Once paid, his credit would finally be cleared. And when I told him that, you could actually see the relief hit his face. Not excitement, relief. The kind of relief that comes from finally realizing your future may not be ruined after all. And honestly, he deserved that second chance, because from everything I saw, this young man had been trying to do the right thing with his life. He worked, he studied, he stayed respectful throughout the hearing. He never yelled at his mother, never insulted her, never lost control emotionally, even after everything. That says a lot about someone's character. But this case also left me thinking about something bigger. Sometimes the people closest to us are capable of causing the deepest damage. Not always intentionally, but damage all the same. And family does not erase accountability. Love does not erase consequences. At the end of the day, adulthood means taking responsibility for the problems we create, instead of handing them to our children and hoping they survive them. Thankfully, this young man got a second chance before the damage became permanent. But emotionally, that kind of betrayal takes much longer to repair, sometimes years, sometimes never completely. And that's the part of cases like this that people don't always see after the cameras stop rolling. The legal issue may end in a courtroom, but the emotional consequences usually continue long after everyone goes home.